Hey everyone, I'm out here in the garage with the Acura RL once again, and that's because what we're going to be doing today is replacing the alternator belt. So stay tuned. Alright, so we're going to be replacing the alternator belt on the RL, and I just want to talk a little bit about how I found out that the alternator belt is bad. So as you know, I've replaced the tires on this car after I replaced the rear struts, and then I took my car to a local shop to have the wheels aligned. And while I was there, they did a courtesy check of the car. And they told me that they found that the alternator belt was bad. And I said, okay, I'll change that when I get home. The other couple things they told me though were a little bit disturbing. And one of those was that the spark plugs needed to be replaced, or they suggested that they be replaced. And I said, no, I've already checked those, they're just fine. They also recommended replacing the air filter on this car, but as you know, I just replaced the air filter about 3 weeks ago. So I knew that was false. So my point of bringing that up is make sure that when you go to these shops, as I do also, I know the history of this car, I know what's been done, what has not been done on this car. So I would be very careful, be very wary about what information you get from shops about the health of your car. And in this case, if I had just gone ahead, if I didn't know anything about this car and I was just the normal Joe Blow going in there to take my car in to have it serviced, they probably would have gotten an extra $200 out of me that day for things I didn't need. So I just wanted to mention that just off the bat here, just so you're kind of aware of that if you're not already aware. And so let's go ahead and get into replacing the alternator belt on the RL. Alright, so hopefully you can see this okay. It's a very dark area here. I tried to remove as many things as possible so you could see really well. So I've got the battery out of here. I also took out the coolant reservoir. So there's our alternator right there. That's the belt for the alternator. And then it goes over here to the crank pulley. And then right behind that, that is the air conditioning belt. And then the belt behind that one is a power steering belt. So the good thing about replacing the alternator belt is the first belt on here, so you don't have to remove all those other belts to get to it. So the first bolt is right here. That is a 12 millimeter. So we'll go ahead and loosen that. Okay, that's probably good enough. You don't need to actually take it out, just go ahead and loosen it, that's it. Alright, so there's a bolt right below the alternator we need to loosen up. So I've got a 14 millimeter here. Go ahead and loosen that up. Alright, it's loose. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and loosen the belt. And how I do that is there's an adjuster right here. And that adjuster requires a 6 millimeter. So I've got a 1/4 inch ratchet with the 6 millimeter socket on it. You can also use a box wrench if you want. So to loosen this, as you're looking at it from this direction, to loosen it is left. And then to tighten it is right. But when you set your ratchet, for example this one, to loosen it I go this direction. So it's a little bit backwards. So let's go ahead and get this off. So how I normally do this is loosen this up all the way. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my 1/4 inch ratchet on there and loosen that up all the way. Alright, so that's loosened all the way. And then what I do is just pull up on the belt, and that pulls the alternator over. Okay? And then to get this off, just come down underneath here, underneath the pulley on the alternator, and then just pull it around like that. It should come right off. We'll pull our belt out, and as you can tell, this one looks pretty bad. It's got a lot of cracks in it, and that is, I'm definitely glad the shop caught that because I had not checked this in a while. I think I only have about 40,000 miles on this belt. So if I remember correctly, I actually replaced this belt when I replaced the engine. So that's pretty bad there. Alright, so here's our new belt. This is a Bando 5PK935, and Bando belts are typically OEM for Honda and Acura cars, so that's why I chose this one. But Continental, Gates, any of those really good high quality brands will work. So I just happened to find this one that was available, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on. Okay, so I'm going to route this around the crank pulley first, and then we'll put it on the alternator. That all the way over there, like that. And got that on the pulley. And I'll come over here. I'm going to go over the top, like that. That one slipped on a lot easier than the other one came off. Alright, so now I've got the belt back on the alternator. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up. And I'm just going to tighten it up reasonably right now, then we'll check it and make sure it's tightened up to spec. So, as we talked about, to tighten the belt, we want to have our ratchet go in the opposite direction, so I'm going to flip this around. Because to tighten it, you go that direction. To loosen it, you come this way. Alright, so let's go ahead and tighten this up. I'm going to do it by hand first. Okay, throw the ratchet on there. Again, 6mm. Okay, so that's reasonably tight right there. It's not quite to spec, so we're going to check that next. Alright, so to tighten the belt, you need a belt tension gauge, which I don't have. And typically, they're around $120 for a really good one. You can buy a cheap one, but that requires a little more math and some playing around with it to get it right. So I didn't want to show that on camera here. I don't even have one that I could show anyway. So what I normally do is I use a ruler. So what you're normally supposed to do is apply about 20 foot-pounds of pressure right here between the alternator and the crank pulley. So right in this area. So I just kind of think in my head, what does 20 foot-pounds of pressure feel like? So as you're tightening, for example, a bolt on like a valve cover, that's roughly around 8 foot-pounds. And so a little bit over twice that is kind of what I think in my head. So I just kind of take a couple fingers, push down on there, and then I take my ruler and I check that distance. So on a brand new belt, it is 0.28 to 0.31 inches. On a used belt, it's 0.38 to 0.45 inches. So let's go ahead and tighten it some more. Okay. And at this point, I'll grab the ruler. Again, this is not very scientific, so you can try this if you like, or just go ahead and buy yourself a belt tension gauge if you think that'd be a little bit easier for you. I just didn't want to spend the money for one of those. So I just put the belt on here like this. Try to keep it stationary. And then I just push down, and hopefully I can see it at the same time. So I'm going to go for 5/16, which is... So I just basically line the top of the belt up at 5/16 of an inch. About right there. And then I push down. And just try to keep the ruler stationary. And as you can see, it's a little bit below that, so I think it needs to be a little bit tighter. Okay, I think that's going to be pretty close there. Right about right there. That's pretty close. Yeah, I think I'm going to call that good right there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the lock bolt to 16 foot-pounds. That's this one right here. So I'll put that on there. Alright, that's tightened up. Alright, and then the bolt down below, that's 14mm. That one gets tightened down to 33 foot-pounds. Alright, so this belt is considered new at this point because it hasn't run on the car for more than 5 minutes. So we're going to take the car outside, let it run for 5 minutes, and then we're going to tighten the belt down to the used belt specification. Alright, so now that I've let the car run for about 5 minutes, I need to tighten the belt down to the used belt specification, which is again 0.37 to 0.45 inches, or roughly around 3/8 of an inch to 7/16 of an inch. So not much. We're not going to loosen it very much at all. So let's go ahead and do that. So we need to loosen our bolts first. I'll start with this top bolt. 12 millimeters. That should be good enough. And then the bottom bolt is 14 millimeters. That should be good enough right there. I'll put it on 3/8. Press down on this first. And actually that's pretty close right there. I'll loosen it up just a little bit. Again, to loosen it, you go this way. Okay, that's about all I'm going to do there. Alright, then we'll tighten our bolts back up. Specification again on this one, 16 foot-pounds. And then on the bottom bolt is 33 foot-pounds. Again, 12 millimeters here. The one down there is 14 millimeters. Okay, that's tightened. Alright, and that one's done too. Alright, so the alternator belt's done on the RL. Again, just like most Honda jobs, very, very simple on this car. Now, the typical recommendation for the alternator belt is 24 months or 30,000 miles. That's when you're supposed to inspect it. I hadn't done it since, I believe, when I put the engine in the car. I think it was back in 2016. So, yeah, I neglected to do that. That's my fault. So hopefully this information was helpful, and thanks for watching.